almost anything a young man could want. The euphoria did not last long. Now it was America's turn to be disoriented, dizzy. Maybe because Americans also had become accustomed to stages, to gradualism. After all, the war had begun this way, through fits and starts, until the United States joined it following the attack on Pearl Harbor. It finally entered the war, united on the surface, but badly divided beneath. For a large number of Americans had opposed entering it right up to the last month of 1941. The country then unified against infamy, but there was not, many later good war commemorations notwithstanding, an eloquent definition of what the country was fighting for. This also took some time. Following the war, there was some residual victor's guilt, for a few Americans must have realized that millions of Germans and Japanese warriors also were returning home to a strange adjustment, yet they were denied the benefit of victory. Americans, no matter what they had done in the war, had the fact of a victory on their side. But like the chronology of the war, it wasn't clear-cut. This was the first war anyone could remember, or that most people knew of, that had been anticipated so long in advance. So, too, with its aftermath. The atomic bombs ended the war before many people thought it would finally be over, yet the remains of those killed in action didn't begin to come back in large numbers from their temporary burial places until the latter part of 1946. Families were given a choice to repatriate them or leave them where they were. Veterans had been coming home for some time already. Government officials had long been planning for the post-war period. Some, the State Department, for example, since before the war even began. By 1943, Franklin Roosevelt had ordered Bernard Baruch to oversee a post-war adjustment program and to plan accordingly. Both houses of Congress had set up special post-war committees. Secretary of Commerce Henry Wallace, who had received warnings for at least 2 years about the adjustment, noted in October 1945 that the nation's GNP could probably contract by about $40 billion, with a loss of wages of around half that amount, which meant between 7 and 8 million unemployed by the middle of 1946. How well did they do? From the perspective of the 21st century, they did all right. There was no economic or social collapse in America after the war. Considering the millions of people on the move and the altered country they found, it was remarkable that there was not a bigger disruption. Americans, however, were used to that. The World War II generation was only one removed from one of the largest generations of immigrants. Nearly 30 million came between 1880 and 1920. This does not include another big move, so big we now call it the Great Migration. That of African Americans from the rural South, where most of them lived, to the northern cities, where by 1930 their population is said to have grown by some 300%. This accelerated from around 3 million in the North and 10 million in the South in 1940 to more than 5 million in the North and 10 million in the South in 1950, many of whom had already migrated to southern towns and cities. In other words, almost 75% of African Americans were found in the rural South in 1900. In 1950, this figure had fallen to less than 20%. How much of this change was anticipated or planned, and how much happened arbitrarily, cannot be known. All we know is that it happened and had been happening for some time.